So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who is able to join us today, wherever you happen to be in the world. This is Coffee Talk or at Coffee Talk Live if you're looking for me on YouTube, or Prepper University on YouTube, or at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, where this is also being broadcast. I don't know if anybody's there or not because I can't see any of the comments from there, I don't believe, as well as fistfulofradio.com. Podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon, as we get ready to have our little live discussion about what's going on in the world, today, taking a look at some of the snippets from the news and the occasional cat. And for those of you who can see, there's Dusty sleeping in the chair, and Daniel is on the other side of the room there, her brother, as we get ready to get flying here. And of course, for those of you who are listening and not able to see what's going on, I do try to read as many of the comments as is reasonable so that you can keep up with the conversation for those who are able to join in the live portion on YouTube at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and follow along. So I'm not just talking to myself and being completely crazy, just a little bit crazy. And I'll acknowledge some of the people who have been able to chime in thus far. I see Helter is here, D-Lo, Rodney is here, Dragon, John is here. He says, able to make it live today, Cat fans, Preparedness Veteran, Urban Angst, and Anarchy from rural Minnesota are chiming in thus far. And of course, in a moment here, we'll dive into what is going on in the world, taking a look at some of the news, taking a look at some of the things you've heard about, and maybe a few things that you have not. A few more people chiming in there. I see Boogers. I see all people. And Cruising, he says, just a wee bit, not any more crazy than gun grabbers for the last 18 hours. You're going to be hearing a lot of that because of what happened. I think what was it, Minnesota? John says, FYI, I've been advised there is an ammo run today. Not a surprise. Yeah, I bet. I bet. Well, there has been ever since October 7th when things jumped off in the Middle East. Firearms and ammunition sales spiked again. Things like that trigger that sort of a reaction from people. It's kind of like when the C virus pandemic or plandemic, as is the case for many people, jumped off. Everybody ran out, and then you couldn't find vitamins or toilet paper anywhere. New York Patriot says, checking in from the People's Republic of New York. Yeah, there you go. People's Republic of New York. I totally get your thing there. And it's Maine, not Minnesota. What am I saying? Maine, right? There's been an incident in Maine, and it's really it is kind of interesting. This is from CNN News. You could pick your own news source because they're all saying pretty much the same thing. You know how that goes. One more here. I see Monkey is here. He says, we'll be in a meeting for a bit, but we'll try to listen in. Oh, you're not going to learn anything in the meeting anyways. So it says, at least 16 people dead, sources say, as a person of interest is being sought in 2 shootings in Lewiston, Maine. I've heard these numbers are all over the place. At the first time I heard it, it was 20, then it was 22, then 16, and now I'm hearing 18. So they don't even know. But they will talk about it. And this is important because one thing is immediately revealed in this, which I do appreciate because I read a couple of these stories, but also whenever something like this happens, it's used as a platform to try to create even greater restrictions on your A2 rights. Or 2A rights. I said it backwards. So here we go. At least 16 people are dead and dozens are injured following 2 shootings Wednesday night at a bowling alley and a restaurant in Lewiston, Maine, sources say. I heard it was a bar. This is what I mean. It's like there's a lot of inconsistency. And an intensive manhunt is underway for a person of interest. Robert Card, 40, of Bowdoin, is a person of interest and should be considered armed and dangerous. Maine Department of Public Safety Commissioner. What is this? Hold on. Pop-up ad. Public Safety Commissioner Mike Sashchuk said law enforcement officials in Maine tell CNN that Card is a certified firearms instructor and a member of the U.S. Army Reserve. Card has recently made threats to carry out a shooting at a National Guard facility in Saco, Maine, and also reported mental health issues, including hearing voices, officials say. Now, one, and I'll stop right there. There's not too much you can really say about this, okay? There's not too much you can say about this. Like 16 to 20 people are dead and another 20 or so are injured or something along those lines. But this is the most important thing that was said. And that's really where the emphasis should be. Number one, he's already made threats. He made threats at a National Guard facility in Saco. He made them either to personnel or to the VA. Okay, I'm assuming. Secondly, he's reported to have mental health issues, including hearing voices, which is schizophrenia, which makes him very dangerous if he's not under check, if he's not being medicated, if he's not being observed, if he's not in therapy. People with schizophrenia can be extremely dangerous. I know from personal experience, my mother had schizophrenia, and she was a very violent person. So you knew, basically, they knew, the Army Reserve knew, the VA knew, I'm assuming, that he was dangerous, that he had made threats, that he had mental health issues, and that very likely schizophrenia because he was hearing voices. This is something that could have been prevented. And it's got nothing to do with firearms. Again, remember, he's on an Army Reserve. He goes to an Army Reserve base. He can find weapons if he didn't own any. So I'm going to go ahead and catch up a couple of comments here. Urban says, I was busy and missed the main story. I guess it's a mass shooting and the guy is white, so the media is having a heyday. Indeed. Rodney says, let no tragedy go to waste. The litany of gun grabbers. And Cruising says, effing renter confronted me about this shooting at 11 p.m., all fired up, asking why it's always a white dude. That's not true. It's not always a white person. New York Patriot says, and again, he slipped through all the cracks and the feds ignored all the signs. And then Rodney says, I wish we had the equivalent of the 2A here in New Zealand. Instead, only criminals as well as well armed, and when seconds count, the police are an hour away. And that's really kind of the point, is that they're a phone call away, but how long is that going to take? And following up on your point there, Rodney, it's important. I've told this story before about when my wife and I were driving home from work and we saw a guy, there was a black guy in the middle of the street. He had taken his shirt off and he had what looked like a 9mm pistol. And he was walking around through the traffic in the middle of the street at the traffic stop, pointing the gun at people's windshields. And he was yelling something. And we called the police. I called the police. That would be DeKalb County. I was on hold for like 14 minutes before anybody answered. And we had already driven away because we were like, yeah, don't hang around here. Let's keep going. And, the police will pick up. 14 minutes. And then how long for a squad car to get out there? At least another 5 to 10 minutes. You see what I'm saying? We were armed. So, I mean, if he had started firing, I would have returned fire. But you see my point. And I didn't hear about any shooting incident in that area. Neither did I hear about an arrest. So, yeah, you can't always rely on that they're just going to show up when you need them. And I see Gary Edwards has joined us today. And Helter says, people are always blaming the tools murderers use. They never talk about the murderers. People have elected to be defenseless, ignoring their responsibilities to protect themselves and their families. Yeah, why take responsibility when you can put it on someone else? All People says yet another anti-2A MK Ultra induced PSYOP has occurred in America, and this one has taken place in Maine. And John says Maine has a very restrictive gun law state. Indeed. And New York Patriot says Jacinda Ardern didn't do any favors for the Kiwis' gun rights. And then the warden has joined us today. Thanks for popping in. Dragon says as society becomes more precarious for decent living, more of this craziness is going to take place. But again, and I'm glad they mentioned it in the article, and I'm surprised that CNN talked about this part. Again, yeah, this is a formidable person because he is a certified firearms instructor, and B, he's in the U.S. Army Reserves currently. But again, A and B, A, he's already made threats at the National Guard facility in Saco that he was going to shoot people, that he was going to do something like this. And they know that he has a mental health issue, including that he hears voices, which is extremely dangerous when you're talking mental health. People who hear things and seeing things can be very violent, and very dangerous. So they knew they had someone who potentially could be very dangerous and left it unchecked. Meanwhile, every time my wife goes to the VA, she's got to get grilled like she's crazy. I guess they're not going to do anything about it if she is. I don't know what to say. It says at least 16 people are dead. I've heard it. Like I said, those numbers are all over the place. I heard 22, then I heard 20, then I heard 18. I don't know yet. I don't think they know. Dozens were injured, though it wasn't immediately clear how many were hurt due to gunfire, the law enforcement sources told CNN. So there you go. Again, my argument, this is something that could have been prevented. Although I do commend them for mentioning that there's a serious mental health issue here. But at the same time, reiterating, it's something that could have been prevented. You don't walk around on a National Guard base, I'm going to snap, I'm going to shoot people, I'm going to go to the club and kill a bunch of people, whatever. That's something you might want to report. That's something that, I'm assuming the VA knows about this if he's already classified as having mental health issues. Seriously? There you go. Urban says many more people each year are killed by cars. So we should immediately ban cars. Yeah, and malpractice. Malpractice and cigarette smoking, heart attacks. You should ban heart attacks. Ban fried food. John says it could have been prevented by an armed plebe. That is true. If someone was in one of those places that was armed and had the gonads for it, because again, you can carry a gun, you can carry a knife, whatever. There's a difference between having it and actually being willing to use the tool. So if you just had that one person, and I've heard of incidences like this, many, where there was an active situation and someone in the crowd happened to be armed and drew and fired, that could have been stopped right there, and he wouldn't have gotten away, or he might not have hurt so many people or anyone at all. You never know. We'll never know now. Preparedness says, I should imagine mental support has diminished through lack of funding and lockdowns. Who knows? Cruising says, should ban hand and feet. Statistically, 2 times more people are beaten to death by unarmed people than rifles. True. Or blunt instruments, blunt objects, things like that. Because again, and I went over this in great detail some time ago, that the statistics for how many incidences involving firearms between a criminal act or self-defense or an accident, for example, are lumped together. They don't split it up. So you don't know how much of what is which. All People says there was a killer nurse in the UK recently, so let's ban hospitals and the medical practice in order to keep society safe. I think we talked about that, didn't we? Like a couple months back, we talked about that one. She was killing people in the hospital, killing babies, right? Is that the one? And Speaking of hospitals, as we slip around here, oh, Fluke Man has a question. He says, was it abortionists? I see what you're trying to do there. Abortionists probably murder more babies than mass shooters. Are they going to ban surgeon equipment? No, they're not. They're not. I know what you're suggesting there. I understand. But yeah, that's legal. That is legal. Looking at wealthy living, it says disturbing findings, spike protein formation and cardiac anomalies emerge after the mRNA C virus vaccination. No kidding. New research conducted in Germany has shed light on the rapid formation of spike proteins in both rat and human heart cells following C virus vaccination. This groundbreaking study, published as a rapid communication paper, suggests the mRNA vaccines developed by Pfizer and Moderna induce different cardiac abnormalities, which may be attributed to an mRNA toxicity reaction. It's a little late now. Plus, they're exempt, so you can't even sue them if you have a heart attack or a stroke. The findings have significant implications for the understanding and treatment of cardiac events following mRNA-based C virus vaccination, potentially explaining persistent cardiac symptoms in long C virus patients. Within 48 hours of vaccination, researchers detected the presence of spike proteins in both rat and human heart cells cultures. This discovery highlights the efficiency of the mRNA vaccines in instructing cells to produce spike proteins, which is a bad thing. The study revealed distinct responses in heart cells exposed to Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. And they're not explaining here what spike proteins are, so I guess I'm going to have to do it. Spike proteins are when you have a virus, okay? The spike protein is the protein that the virus uses to attach itself to a healthy cell. I'm oversimplifying, so that it can invade the cell. So if there's an increase in spike proteins, then there's an increase in your susceptibility to illness. So that's important. Plus heart abnormalities on top of it, because again, this was not tested. It was tested on all of you. It was tested on the people who took this shot. And to sit there and study it now and say, whoops, looks like there's really bad after effects and you could be seriously injured or killed by this. It's a little freaking late after you have manipulated, tricked, and coerced millions of people into taking the shot. And taking it with no liability, zero liability. You can't even go back on it and sue them for wrongful death or wrongful injury or pain and suffering or anything like that, like you typically could with other medications. People really got screwed on this. If you did not take the jab, I commend you. I really do. John says taxation is extortion. Yes, indeed. Yes, it is. And Bob67 said Nurse Lucy Letby. I think that's who it was. She was killing babies or something in the hospital. I remember reading that article. Urban says, anyone surprised the mRNA news has not been paying attention or surprised by it? Yeah, and then it's barely a blurb. You're really not seeing much about this in the news. They don't want you to know that, oops, guess what? Guess what? It's really not good for you after all. Helter says, this appears to be a clickbait article. I'd like to see the original study and whether or not it has been reviewed. Accepting things you want to hear at face value is just confirmation bias. Rodney says there are many solid peer-reviewed studies showing a shocking amount of adverse reactions for the C virus mRNA vaccines. I've seen little to no reporting of this in the mainstream media. And then Dragon says the credibility these people lost as a result of this played a big role in successfully rallying the lay people against the lockdowns, masks, and mandates. And Cruising said your number one warning that this was a bad idea was when the government protected the drug companies from liability. Good point. Good point. They covered their butts really easily. Here's another one that you're not going to see in the news. This is barely a blurb in the news, and this is really important. And this has to do. Oh, and I see Cyberjack Senior has dropped in here. Thanks for popping in today. Has to do with your sweet old, dear old, lovable old, huggable old, storytelling, ice cream eating Uncle Joe, who his family is as shady as he is. And we're going to talk about his brother today. And this one is flying right under the radar, flying right under the radar. And I've seen this on multiple news agencies, but not prominently displayed so that anybody might actually be able to read the story. This is from the Washington Examiner. If it ever comes up, here we go. Not just Hunter, James Biden steps into the center of Biden family controversy. And this one's a little bit to unwrap here. Okay. It says House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer reported Friday that James Biden, who is 7 years younger than Joe Biden, sent his older brother a $200,000 check in March of 2018. The check came on the same day that one of James Biden's business ventures loaned him the same amount. So he got a loan and then turned that loan into a check and gave it to his brother. The implication is that the money from the business was actually intended for the older Biden. James Biden wrote the check to Joe Biden as a loan repayment. AmeriCorps, a distressed company, loaned money to James Biden, who then sent it to Joe Biden, Comer said in a video accompanying the announcement. Even if this was a personal loan repayment, it's still troubling that Joe Biden's ability to be paid back by his brother depended on the success of his family's shady financial dealings. And it's going to get deeper than this. The White House says the claims amount to little more than a distraction, and the Democrats on the same House committee say Comer has more bank records available that he's withholding in order to protect the narrative. This is failure theater that is intended to be a shiny object to distract people from how they are incapable of doing the basics of governing. White House spokesman Ian Sams said in a prepared statement, it's no coincidence they rushed out a new distraction mere minutes after yet another failed speaker vote. But okay, the $200,000 loan is one thing. It says, as I move down here, I'm trying to find it. This is where it gets really messy, is down here. Nonetheless, this is not James Biden's first controversy. Joe Biden intervened to help, it's bouncing around because of the pop-up ads, excuse me, to help his younger brother with the fallout of an unsuccessful nightclub venture in the 1970s. More recently, James Biden has taken loans from some of Joe Biden's top donors and allies, according to a 2020 ProPublica investigation. In this most recent revelation, James Biden procured loans totaling $600,000 from a company called AmeriCorps Health on the premise that his last name is Biden and could open doors, and that he could obtain a large investment from the Middle East based on his political connections, according to the documents released after the company went bankrupt. James Biden appears to have settled last year with AmeriCorps by agreeing to pay back $350,000 of that loan. Former White House, which he hasn't done yet, by the way. Former White House ethics attorney Richard Painter says the White House and Comer should both realize the full details of what they know about the $200,000 check. As my understanding, and they don't get into it here, is that he didn't have a job even. That he walked in there with a business card that said, "Hi, I'm James Biden, brother of Joe Biden. I want $600,000 in loans." And they gave it to him because of his political connection. And then he didn't pay it back. and then he cut a 1/3 check of that $600,000 loan to his brother Joe. Then the AmeriCorps had a settlement with James because he never paid them one thin dime of that $600,000 by agreeing to pay back a little more than half of it, $350,000, which they accepted because they were going bankrupt. And he hadn't done that either. Really shady. Really shady. Nature Nerd says 200,000 tax free, I'm sure. Indeed. I don't think you, I don't know. It probably is. Preparedness says anyone in the military with relatives like that would have lost their vetting by now. Just cannot believe even a figurehead like this is allowed to stay in office. Dragon says if any normal citizen gave another family member 200,000, the IRS would want their greedy fingers on it. What a joke. They'd investigate that. They'd investigate that. Why are you cutting a personal check like that? It's not even for business. Chris Trapp says the main shooter could be in Canada by now. Maybe. Helter says in the old days, if a politician was mired in a scandal, they'd resign from their position. Or if the evidence proved the scandal was illegal, the politician would be arrested and charged. Yeah, that was the old days, Helter. Dragon says they're not even trying to hide their dirty deeds anymore. No, dirty deeds done dirt cheap, as AC/DC would say. Nature Nerd says our Congress is so irresponsible that the U.S. credit rating went down from AAA to a AA. Affects everyone in the country as far as interest rates go. But that is really shady. That is really shady. And he got away with it, and he will continue to get away with it because he's going to be protected just like Hunter Biden is. AmeriCorp isn't going to continue to go after him. They're bankrupted out. They're gone. And the settlement that they agreed to try to get some of that loan back, he hasn't repaid it. And then what about the 200,000 that he transferred to Joe? Where's that money? Is he going to give that back? What was that loan for? Does anyone have an explanation? There's no explanation for it. Nobody's even talking about this. And this article actually, this one is actually dated today. But again, it's flying under the radar. It's popped up here and there for the last couple of days, but they're not really talking about it. And I think it's important. I think it's really important because it ties in with more shady deals. Cruising says, imagine being willing to sell your nation out for as little as 200,000. I know. Imagine being able to sell out anything for $200,000. There's a lot of people that will do it, though. There's a lot of people that will sell out for a lot less than that. A lot of people took the jab for a cup of coffee. Free cup of coffee, a free donut at Dunkin's. You know what I mean? But the part that's really sick about it is I can understand how a lot of people might be desperate and say, hey, this may be my only chance in life to get my hands on this kind of money. These people don't need the money. They don't need the money. They're already wealthy. They're already wealthy. Why do you have to be shady? Why? It's not logical. It's just pure selfishness. It's just pure selfishness. Nature Nerd says they destroy everyone even remotely around Trump, but turn a blind eye to Joe's multi-$100,000 dealings. And Urban says dirty deeds done dirt cheap, certainly not with today's inflation. Yeah. Nature Nerd says the economic damage to your country is not worth selling out your country, even if it's millions of dollars. Correct. Because you're hurting millions of people. I wish I could do that. I wish I could just walk in there, carte blanche, and hold up a business card to say, yes. Do you know who I am, sir? I would like a loan for $600,000. Oh, here you go. Anything else we can do for you? Wouldn't that be amazing to be able to do that? But, that's not how life works, unfortunately. The majority of people have to struggle for every thin dime, and that's just the way it is. I have been working since I was like 9 or 10 years old, and there's never a break in sight. It's incredible. Chris says the Palestinians are trying to act like if Israel doesn't give them more gasoline, the UN won't be able to operate. And Preparedness says, I had the jab. I take solace from the fact that it was AstraZeneca. Never again. Yeah, don't do that again, okay? Please. And he says, I didn't get a free donut. That was something they were doing in the United States where, if you had your Vax card and you showed your Vax card, that you could go in certain places and get a free coffee, a free soda, a free donut, something like that. It's like, ooh, I can get free donuts because I got the jab. That's like something you do with kids. That's like, hey, kid, I got to give you this shot. Little 8-year-old Jimmy, I'll give you a sticker. We're adults. Adults went for that. Adults went for that. It's incredible. It's incredible. But, most people never mature, I guess. What are you going to do? Chris says, never forget the videos of the old New York City mayor saying you get a free French fries. Yeah, I think that sounds familiar. Is it free fries? That sounds really familiar. Uh, Unbelievable. Maybe the excuse me. Maybe the migrants can pass it out. Give them something to do, as the Democratic Party tries to get them all jobs now. You don't need jobs. We'll give them to the migrants. That's what they're here for. New York Post. Democrats are pushing work authorization for migrants so they can vote. So they can vote. Is that what it is? I think they want them to work so they can tax them. If you think offering migrants luxury hotel rooms, free meals, laundry service, transportation, healthcare, and immigration lawyers is excessive, just wait until they can vote. Democrats are pushing to give non-citizens the franchise in local elections in New York City, Boston, and other municipalities, as well as statewide in Connecticut. The number of migrants pouring across the southern border has hit a record high, according to data released Saturday. We all know that. Illegal crossings soared 21% over the previous month. On a yearly basis, the figure reached 2.48 million, and that's the ones that they know about. Democrats may feign shock and distress. Don't be fooled. Democrats see these newcomers as the guarantee of a permanent voting majority in local elections, not years from now after the newcomers become citizens. Right now, Mayor Eric Adams' rhetoric is typical. He warns the overwhelming number of migrants arriving, 16 to 17,000 a month, will destroy the city, but he is also leading the legal effort to turn migrants into voters. Adams and other New York Democrats pushed President Joe Biden to expedite work authorizations for them. They said it's about making migrants self-sufficient. Maybe, but Democrats have another powerful motive. The fine print of New York City's Our City, Our Vote law. God, I hate the titles they give to some of these damn laws. And it's so bullshit. Excuse me. It says enacted in December 2021 says anyone with a work authorization who has been in the city for a mere 30 days or more can vote, even if that person entered the country illegally. Biden's recent action fast-tracking work authorizations for Venezuelan border crossers who make up 41% of the Big Apple's recent arrivals will make tens of thousands of them eligible to vote under the city's law as soon as they obtain their working papers. That is, if New York City's voting law is allowed to go into effect. And again, if that's what they're after, I hope it backfires, because remember, especially if you're talking about Venezuelans, they are running from a country that America is turning into. Hopefully they're smart enough to see that if they're going to vote at all. Catching up some of the comments here. Nature Nerd says Palestine is definitely getting gas and supplies from their complex tunnel system, even with Israel cutting off exports. They're getting support from all those neighboring countries. They won't let them into their countries, but they'll support them so that the Palestinians and the Hamas will burn themselves out, because the rest of the Middle East doesn't give a shit about them. They really don't. Rodney says they gave darker skinned people KFC here in New Zealand if they took the jab. Seriously? That's incredible. Tyrannicide says Wilhelm, a.k.a. de Blasio. Nature Nerd says there's a video called Israel Subterranean War. Hamas taxes all goods that go through their 300 miles of tunnels into bordering countries, and some of them are 100 feet underground. Urban says, looks like YouTube doesn't like all the keywords for Middle East issues. This is the third time I try to say that Hamas diverts foreign aid, including gas. Wow, really? They're getting you again. They are getting you again. They do censor the comments. You got to be careful. Cruising says the constant attempts to give non-citizens the rights of citizens pisses me off, perhaps more than anything else. Yeah. Like I said, again, I don't have a problem necessarily with immigration if it's done properly. You want to come to the country, you want to become part of it, you want to become part of the culture and of the people. That's fine. You come here, you learn the language, you learn the history, you learn the culture, you become a citizen, you work, you do whatever you're going to do. a lot of America is founded on that concept. But if you're just going to sneak in and do whatever the hell you want and live off the fat of the land and the taxpayers are paying for it, you can get the hell out of here. It is really insulting, especially to people who did it the right way. Preparedness says here the majority of voters in Londonistan reflect who they voted for. Sadiq Khan, absolutely useless figurehead. Same will happen there. You know who you needed was Sun Yun Khan from Star Trek. He would have been a better leader. Anyways, if this is their concept, I think they want them to work so they can tax them, legally tax them. If they want them to work so that they can vote, that's an interesting take. It wouldn't surprise me, but again, it could also backfire. It could backfire because, as I pointed out, many of these people are escaping from countries that it looks like the United States is trying to turn into, and they won't want that. Venezuela, Cuba, places like this where they know what a communist government really looks like. Oh, Stefan Riley has joined us. Thanks for popping in today. Rodney says, yes, Pacific Islanders and Maori got KFC vouchers once they'd accepted the jab, a gross and racist policy by our government. Interesting. That'd be my argument. Why can't I get chicken? Why can't you? Better hope they're eating chicken. Remember, in China, KFC is at the forefront of 3D printed chicken. They're not eating real chicken. This is the world we live in. It's scary. It is scary. Now, this is interesting, and this is in Chicago, and this is something we've already talked about, but they have not improved their situation. It got worse, and this is from Axios, which is the news source here. It says Chicago quietly renews controversial migrant shelter staffing contract. Now, without even reading this article yet, because sometimes I don't read them. Most of the time I don't read them, actually. But you might remember a couple of weeks back, we talked about that in Chicago, there was this major problem with the fact that they didn't try to negotiate for contracts with the shelters at all. And people were making insane amounts of money from the state for nothing, for doing nothing at these shelters. They were earning crazy money. And this person, the Mayor Brandon Johnson, has renewed that contract even after it was exposed and he was thrown under the bus for it. He renewed the contract without negotiating it. It says Mayor Brandon Johnson this week quietly re-upped a controversial migrant shelter contract with favorite healthcare staffing that some alders has called shameful and insanity. Why does it matter? The multi-million-dollar contract has drawn intense criticism over the Kansas-based staffing company's exorbitant rates and use of out-of-state labor. So here we are. Chicago approved a new $40 million contract with favorite healthcare staffing through mid-October of next year per city's filings. The terms include reduced rates for certain positions, including housekeepers and nurses. Hourly rates went from $60 to $200 in March to $40 to $156 today, per an Axios analysis. So where are we here? That's all bullets. In September 2022, as the city rushed to open the first migrant shelters, Mayor Lori Lightfoot signed an emergency contract with Favorite Healthcare, which the city has since paid more than $57 million to. In a budget address this month, Johnson called it one of many expensive emergency contracts he inherited from Lightfoot. Some alders, including Alderman Brendan Riley, have called the contract to be canceled. Riley told Axios on Wednesday that he was caught off guard by the new contract. The mayor didn't consult me. If he had, I would have advised him against it, Riley said. For 1 week of staffing at the Woodlawn shelter that month, Favorite charged $427,991. That's an average of $117 per hour per employee. Most who worked some overtime. Payment for one nurse to work a single 12-hour shift in the shelter was $2,700. The wages also covered hotel costs for favorites, mostly out-of-town staff. So he complained that he inherited that contract from Lori Lightfoot, and so it's her fault, and then renewed the contract. He renewed the contract. Can you imagine working a 12-hour shift and getting $2,700 for it? Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Incredible waste of taxpayer funding. No attempt to negotiate this. Just roll the contract. They've already spent $47 million. Or $57 million. They already spent $57 million on it. Now it's going to cost them another $40. 1 week, $427,991, or $117 per hour per employee on staff. I want to work for $117 an hour. Why can't I find that job? Dragon says city and state governments have so much extra cash they ought to lower taxes or give the taxpayers a refund. It's not the responsibility of local taxpayers to care for non-citizens. I agree. Helter says, I wouldn't be surprised if some homeless people in Chicago tried to pretend that they are illegals. They'd be put on a nice hotel room. And Urban says, come on, people, have a heart. Human traffickers want to get paid too, you know. They work hard doing undocumented tourism tours across the border. Yeah, I'm in the wrong line of work. Here I am struggling. And I could be working in Chicago in this facility for $117 an hour. Oh my God. Yeah, then I won't complain too much about the overtime. Because I'm not a fan of doing overtime. Usually you end up getting taxed to death anyways. That's insane. That is insane. Plus they brought in their own staff from out of town, from Kansas, because that's where, I mean, you couldn't contract a facility in your own home state. You're going to outsource and overpay for it. That's what you're going to do. And they're going to take their people and fly them from Kansas to Chicago. And on top of paying them this wage, you're going to pay for their hotel accommodations. You're probably paying for their meals too. It's insulting. It's absolutely insulting. What a tremendous waste of taxpayer funding. And then they do it again. They do it again. They renew the contract after it's been exposed already. And then he tried to sweep it away and say, oh, well, that was Lori Lightfoot's. That's because of Lori Lightfoot, and I inherited her mess, and yeah, we're going to take care of it. He didn't take care of it. He renewed the contract. Boy, I tell you, you can't trust anybody. You can't trust anybody. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Now, this is a bit that I thought was interesting, talking about John Hopkins. And this is from the New York Post, another one from the New York Post. John Hopkins doctor, bullying exposes the whole profession. And they're talking about one person in particular. I did read some of this article, but it makes an important point. It says, U.S. medical profession has a real credibility problem, and doctors bear a huge share of the blame. I agree. I agree that there is a huge credibility problem with doctors and pediatricians and nurses across the country. Many of them are unprofessional. Many of them are very arrogant, very pushy. Many of them really don't know what they're doing. They really don't know what they're doing. And that's shocking to me. And I've brought this up before, you know, when I was working in the mental health facility, and I had a discussion, an argument, if you will, with the general practitioner for the inpatients at the facility, talking about the jab. And when they were making the argument of why it's good for you and you can trust them, and use the polio vaccine as a reference. And when I questioned them, okay, well, you tell me, how do you get polio? Because I know something about that. And they didn't know. You're a general practitioner. You don't know how people catch polio. That's great. Anyways, get back to the article. Consider the latest news for the bad physician file, the sobering tale of Dr. Jonathan Epstein, a leading pathologist at Johns Hopkins. The doctor allegedly bullied his colleagues to deliver second opinions, supporting diagnoses from his wife, also a pathologist. These included horrifically a surgical bladder removal that may not even have been necessary. Epstein was put on administrative leave in May. Why is the public only finding out about this now? Worse, neither Epstein nor his erstwhile employer has admitted that anything is in the slightest could be wrong. So here we have Hopkins, the byword for medical excellence in America, engaged in a seeming cover-up of what looks like a massive misconduct by one of its top physicians. All hospitals do this. Dr. Jonathan Epstein, 66, was accused of pressuring other doctors at the world-renowned Baltimore hospital to give second opinions that matched the diagnoses made by his wife, according to reports. Courtesy, it's part of a culture among the U.S. medical elite where one hand washes the other. I agree also, because I have seen that, where a doctor will say they went and talked to their colleague, and that the colleague concurs, and the colleague concurs without even researching anything or looking at it, or the colleague was never even spoken to in the first place, but they'll back it up if they're asked. I've actually seen that done. And for what? Back to the article. Recent studies suggest that top-level institutions like Hopkins are not necessarily safer or better for surgical patients than lower-ranked ones. Consider, too, a damning paper by Post contributor and Hopkins professor and surgeon Marty Makary, collecting data that suggests medical error may be the number 3 cause of death in America, right behind heart disease and cancer. Makary's numbers chalk up north of 250,000 deaths, not by any means all caused by bad individual doctors, but still massive evidence of systemic failures, suggesting there that 250,000 deaths a year that occur in the hospital are medical error. And you wonder why I don't want to go to the hospital. I don't want to go to the hospital. Do you want to go to the hospital? Let me see. Plasma Burns says, I can't medically tolerate wearing a mask. Lung collapse. I wasn't allowed inside a business for over 2 years. Wow. That's ridiculous. It really is. That's ridiculous. Urban says, in Canada, the Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons is one of the most corrupt professional organizations around. I believe it. And Urban says, dangerous doctors are protected by their peers and at the associations. And these are people that are put constantly on a pedestal. Doctors, nurses, people like this that, in my experience, personal experience, are often very corrupt, very arrogant, very uncaring, or as they say, poor bedside manner, not to be trusted, inaccurate, make a lot of mistakes, don't know what they're talking about. Case in point, like I had mentioned earlier, the doctor who didn't know how you transmit polio, thought it was airborne. Like, no, that's not quite how you get it. It's not like the same as C virus. You don't inhale polio. Preparedness says they hide behind a certificate. Yeah, many of them do. And that's why I think this is important. Okay, they're focusing on this one guy, this one doctor, Jonathan Epstein right here. I guess that's him in the photograph. For those of you who can see, those of you who are on the live portion on YouTube here. But the fact that they cover it up, the hospital covers for it, the administration covers for it, that other doctors will cover it, that other doctors are just as corrupt, just as arrogant, just as much bullies. And you wonder why people don't want to go to the hospital. Oh, well, you have to trust the science. I don't trust a damn thing. Trust the science. You got me all twisted up. It's not the science that's the problem. It's the scientists. And it's not the medical practices that are the problem. It's the doctors and the nurses and the other staff within it. They're the ones that are the problems. It's unfortunate. And again, they took a Hippocratic oath to do no harm. But remember, an oath is only as good as the person who spoke it. Urban says the only doctors who are sanctioned are the ones recommending alternate therapies instead of the C juice. Yeah, alternative therapies. Oh, they must be a quack. They must be a quack. You know what's a really good way to expose a lot of that? Who knows what Tom's of Maine is? You remember Tom's of Maine? They make toothpaste and mouthwash and deodorant and, toiletries, things like this, HBA stuff, health and beauty aids. Now, once upon a time, Tom's of Maine was not recommended. They said, no, we don't recommend you use Tom's of Maine because they're an organic company. They don't use artificial chemicals and things like that, like most toothpastes. And you couldn't get any credibility for Tom's of Maine until Procter & Gamble bought them. Then all of a sudden, everybody loves them. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Tom's of Maine. I think it was Procter & Gamble, wasn't it? Doesn't Procter & Gamble, aren't they the umbrella for Crest? I might be mistaken because I know Crest bought them. And I'm thinking Crest is owned by Procter & Gamble, or I could be wrong. And, somebody out there might know and they can correct me here if I am. But again, they're worthless. Tom's of Maine, can't trust them. They get bought out by a major industrial company. Oh, yeah, this stuff's great. Brush with it all day. Urban says, I still use Tom's of Maine toothpaste. Tastes brutal, but does the job. Yeah, because I don't want all those nasty chemicals in my mouth. I got enough problems. I have enough problems. Don't you? Now, speaking of organic, and I thought this was very interesting. It says, this is AG Daily, or Agriculture Daily. USDA's new organic rules feed and medicate animals better. So again, the USDA and the FDA are going after organic farms, and they're trying to turn the organic farms into the industrial ones. Organic overhauls have been a long time coming. Among the strengthening organic enforcement rules released earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has previewed today's organic livestock and poultry standards final rule, with a heavy focus on organic producers using better nutrition and medical practices to minimize pain, stress, and suffering in their animals. The new rule hopes to establish clear, strong, and consistent standards for organic livestock and poultry production while providing greater consumer transparency. The flagship requirement says the organic producers treat animals with all necessary treatments, even if they lose out on the organic status. Currently, organic farming is based on the principles that an animal that is allowed to exhibit natural behavior and feeds, with the hope that this will lead to better coping with infections. While there isn't specific data referenced in the USDA's changes, it seems clear the new steps are being taken because of shortfalls in the current organic approach to animal welfare. Lie, lie, lie. That is not what it is. Okay? That's a big lie. And I've seen this going on for years, decades even, between organic, the way the FDA and the USDA treats organic farms and mass production farms. Okay? So first of all, they want them to increase the amount of vaccinations they're getting, which is a problem for people that eat organic meats. They don't want that. That's what the organic farms are giving them. Secondly, they're talking about nutrition and medical practices to minimize pain, stress, and suffering in their animals. Have you seen an industrial farm and the way those animals are tortured and tormented, crushed together and with broken limbs and broken ribs, and just disgusting, so desperately overweight their legs break under their own weight? I have seen this, and you can find video on it if you can stomach it. It's not hard to find video footage of this, but they let the animals free range and eat grass instead of force feeding them corn laced with antibiotics and steroids and stuff like that. And you want them to start doing this. Oh, giving them feed. They don't give them feed on purpose. And as far as greater consumer transparency, organic farms, in my opinion, and from what I've seen, are far more transparent. I've even seen, who is it? There's a couple of egg farms where you can get on their website and see live feed of their chickens, so they can show you how they live. Can you get that at one of these industrial farms that has like 500,000 chickens in one pen? They purposely attack these organic farms all the time. And this is just going to make it worse. And yeah, it's a pet peeve of mine. Frustrates the hell out of me. absolutely frustrates the hell out of me because I know how these animals are treated on these industrial farms. I've seen it. It's disgusting. But, and again, there was another one, and I bring this up too, and I wish I could remember the name of it. There was a documentary talking about organic chickens that I watched, because I've talked about this before. And the guy has the organic farm, and he says that the USDA is there like every month harassing him, testing his chickens, taking blood samples. And there's some bacteria that's supposed to be less than 5,000 parts per million or something in the chicken's bloodstream, and his average around 500. But the industrial farms from Purdue that are up the way from where he lives are somewhere well over 10 to 12,000 per million, and the USDA and the FDA don't even go there. So why are they harassing this guy? Because they can. Wow. Yeah, there we go. There's my little rant. Delo says, thanks for keeping me awake. Love listening to the news. Well, I'm glad you're getting something out of it. And Preparedness says there are many organic certifiers with many differing standards. Transparency isn't there, never will be. Nature Nerd says the government needs to stay out of our food. Well, you know, in anything, the more the government gets involved, sometimes the more they screw things up. Dragon says, one thing I'll never understand is the organically grown produce sitting under sprayers in stores, spraying chlorinated and fluoride water on them and charging a hefty price. Yeah. Helter says, when the USDA says they want to restore trust, what they really mean is they want more regulations and make it harder for farmers to comply. Yeah, and more money. Preparedness is when it comes to animals, it's pretty grim. All People wants to remind us a PSYOP is not the same thing as a false flag. Urban says, I sometimes buy grass-fed beef instead of grain-fed, and it's a completely different product, but it's expensive, very expensive. Most people I know just can't afford it. Yeah, you will get a better experience from it. I go through that with the vegetables. You know, that's a big one on me, is because, you know, my wife has her garden, and if you get a tomato, a carrot, lettuce, or something like that from the store, it's like water. It's no flavor at all. But these big deformed carrots that we pull out, you know, I'll rinse them off. I'll rinse off the dirt and eat that sucker raw, and very flavorful. Is a huge difference. There's a huge difference in flavor from between the industrial farms in produce and in meat than there is from something that was grown organically. West Rose says Joel Saladin and regenerative farming is the way of the future for sanity. Rodney says big food industry is always lobbying to close down local markets here in New Zealand. Yeah, they don't want the competition. They don't want you to know that something better is out there, even though realistically it's a niche genre of people who go after the organic stuff because most people can't afford it. Fluke Man says, is this why you're vegetarian? Guess you feel you're stuck between a rock and a hard case feeding your pets meat. Not really. That's natural for them. You know, the cats, for example, are carnivores. They're carnivorous. They eat very little vegetation in the natural setting. Baki says, I too grow food at home. The naughty can't defeat me. I'll feed the world myself if I have to. Okay. Feed the world myself if I have to. But yeah, stuff that you grow yourself or organically grown, you can really taste it. Or strawberries, you know, for example, that's another good one. You at the supermarket, you can get this honking big strawberry that's just ridiculously huge, but you eat it and there's no flavor. There's nothing there. You get a natural strawberry, it may be that big, but it's really nice and sweet, and it's got a good flavor to it. It's unbelievable. Or, you know, we have our blackberry and blueberry bushes, taste better than anything we can get from the supermarket. And it shows. It shows. The industrial farms, they don't care what it tastes like. They just need to crank it out. They just need to crank it out. All People says those businesses that contracted with Chicago are owned by the Haitian and Nigerian migrants who also happen to have received forgivable business loans. Okay. And Plasma Burn says they use hormones to force vegetable maturity, preventing the natural ripening process, which is where all the flavor and sugars come from, all tasteless. I agree. So we grow. I'll have to pull some out. I'll eat the stuff raw. I eat the carrots raw right out of the ground. And they look crazy. They're like these big, deformed, weird looking things. They don't look anything like the carrots that you get at the supermarket. But anyways, with that, I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping things up. We're at the top of the hour. So thank you, everybody who was able to join us here today on Coffee Talk. That is at Coffee Talk Live on YouTube if you're listening and not able to see, or Prepper University on YouTube, as well as at Coffee Talk Chat on Twitter, and naturally fistfulofradio.com, podcasting out of Atlanta Monday through Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and Friday at noon if you wanted to try to find me there. Thanks everybody who was able to join us today. Hope you got something out of the conversation. And naturally, we will be doing this again tomorrow.